All right, Alexander, let's do an update on the Russian economy because there's a lot of interest on what is going on with the Russian economy because of the ruble's position against the dollar. The ruble has lost a significant amount of strength against the dollar, falling well below the 100 level. And once again, this happens every end of the year, by the way. So I mean, it seems like every end of the year we have to do a video like this on the Russian economy, and you'll explain why. But this has caused, once again, many analysts and collective West media outlets to talk about how the Russian economy is finally the Russian economy is going to collapse. Finally, it's about time. After 3 years of war, after 1,000 days of conflict, it looks like the Russian economy is set to crumble. And here they come with these articles again. But I think that the latest issues with the ruble can be easily explained. There's the seasonal effect. There's the recent sanctions on Gazprombank, and of course, there's just the general strengthening in the dollar after Trump's election win. I mean, I don't understand why. I mean, I guess psychologically I can understand why the dollar strengthened after Trump won, but I mean, there's no real data to explain why the dollar has strengthened because of a Trump victory, maybe in anticipation of what he's going to do for the U.S. economy. Anyway, I think those are the three very basic reasons to explain what's going on. Do you want to elaborate on all these things and talk about why we have to do this video every end of the year?
Every end of the year. Before we do that, can I actually say why I think the dollar is strengthening after Trump has won? And that is that, putting aside the fact that he's now going to increase tariffs and things of that kind, I think what we're seeing, what is probably happening, is that there has been a massive outflow of funds from Europe into the United States. The euro has been weakening. We now have a political crisis in Germany. We're about to have a political crisis in France. The Germans are talking about doing away with their debt brake. Bear in mind that Germany has been the anchor of the euro up to this time. If Germany does away with the debt brake, people will start to wonder about Germany's long-term financial position. So the bond markets and the investors and all of these people are getting very worried at this moment in time. They're saying at least the United States has a solid economy. And for that reason, they're piling out of the euro into the dollar. That's pushing the dollar up. And of course, when that happens, you're absolutely right. It has a general effect because investors around the world then start to move out of other currencies into the dollar. And that is playing some role in the weakening of the ruble that has taken place since the summer. Now, let's talk about the ruble, because you're absolutely right. Every year at this time, we have this discussion. Now, the reason why the ruble always weakens in late autumn, early winter, and this is a structural issue, and there are two reasons for it. Firstly, obviously, we are moving towards the New Year and Christmas holidays, and Russians, like people everywhere, buy lots of things for themselves, for the holidays. They like giving presents, they like buying cars, they like doing all of these things. This is the biggest shopping season in Russia, as it is in most countries. So the result is that there's usually a rush of imports into Russia. Those have to be paid for. That causes the ruble to decline somewhat. It causes inflation in the last couple of weeks of the year to rise. That also puts more pressure on the ruble. And we are definitely seeing something of that this time. In fact, we're seeing a lot of it because Russia has experienced a period of real wage growth. So Russians have a lot of money to spend, and they are spending it. So that's one reason. But there is the other reason, which is perhaps ultimately the more important one, which is that Russian corporates tend to pay off their loans towards the end of the year. So they borrow to some extent. When they borrow in foreign currencies, and there are still Russian corporates that have borrowed or have historic loans in foreign currencies, those loans come up for repayment at the end of the year. So they have to convert rubles into foreign currencies to pay off those loans. And that also happens. And to some extent, it is happening again this time. So this has also contributed to the softening of the ruble, and it is a completely standard thing. So there is a further factor that we've seen oil price volatility over the last couple of months. The oil price has gone up, and then it's gone down. At the moment, it's starting to go up again, but it's all very unstable and very uncertain. There's still a perception that the ruble is to some extent linked to the to the price of oil. So this has also had an effect on weakening the ruble. I think if we are talking about the particular fall that has taken place over the last few days, I think you put your finger on it. It is the sanctions on Gazprombank, because Gazprombank is the bank that was used, that was still allowed to operate within the SWIFT system, and which it was through Gazprombank that Western buyers of Russian oil and gas products, including Turkey, by the way, settled their payments. So that means that because Gazprombank is now basically out of the Western financial system, there is less ability by Westerners to buy Russian oil and gas, also less ability by Turkey. Erdogan is complaining about this, and he's asking for an exemption from these sanctions. So that has put further downward pressure on the ruble. This is going to be temporary because the Russians are going to find ways around. They always do. It's probably going to be a problem that will abate at some point in the new year. And in January, anyway, the ruble historically strengthens. And the reason it strengthens in January is because January is when Russian corporates pay the first tranche of their corporate taxes to the Russian government. That means that they convert any foreign currency that they have into rubles, which of course leads to a general strengthening of the ruble. So that is the historic reason why this happens. Specifically this time, as I said, I think the reason this has gone up, this has happened more this year than we've seen in some other years, is because the volatility in the oil market, the fact that real wages have been rising and people have been spending more, the Gazprombank issue, and I strongly suspect that lurking somewhere in the background, there is some big Russian corporate or agency which is unloading an awful lot of debt and has been doing so over the last few weeks and months, and that has probably also had an effect in depressing the ruble. That has happened many times. I remember that Rostec played a big role in causing the ruble to fall in these in the autumn of 2014, because they had a big debt to repay then. And I suspect something of the same kind is happening now, though again we don't have all the full knowledge about it. This is a temporary phenomenon, and the most important thing to understand is that it doesn't matter. I was looking at some of the underlying figures. Russia is running a trade surplus, a strong trade surplus, as the Russian finance minister Siluanov has pointed out. Because of the fall in the ruble, Russian exports have become even more competitive. So the trade surplus is likely to grow. The fact that there is a big trade surplus and a growing trade surplus looks as if it's going to translate into a budget surplus as well. Just a few weeks ago, the Russian finance ministry was talking about a budget deficit of around 1% of GDP, which is very low. But it looks as if that might actually turn into a surplus instead, partly because of this softening of the ruble and the fact that all of these receipts are coming in because the exports are growing. There is very little external debt, so we're not looking at problems that are going to feed through into the banking system, which is what we have seen in previous ruble crises, like the one in the famous one in 1998, when Russian banks had lots of liabilities in Western currencies, which they couldn't meet because the ruble fell, which caused a general collapse of the banking system. There is nothing like that now. The Russian banking system is in very, very strong health. And last but not least, it's not going to affect, to any great extent, Russia's external trade. I was looking at the figures. 82% of Russia's exports are now paid in currencies which are not part of the dollar. They're paid in RMB, in rubles, in all sorts of other things. And 78% of Russian imports are no longer paid for in dollars. So it's not going to have a significant effect on the state of the Russian economy overall. It'll cause inflation to be a little higher than it might otherwise be. But inflation in Russia has grown anyway over the last 2 weeks. Again, a common thing at this time of year because of the higher spending ahead of the New Year holiday.
Yeah, Russia's going to be awash with rubles. I mean, that's how I see it. They're going to collect a lot of rubles for their gas and their oil. Yeah. And come 2025, the first months of 2025, they're going to balance their budget and the ruble's going to strengthen. To what degree it's going to strengthen, I don't know. But everything's going to be put back into balance in 2025. And until then, they're just going to collect a lot of rubles.
Exactly.
And how does everyone get paid in Russia, including the military facilities, including all of the government workers, everybody, they're all getting paid in rubles. I think this is the most important takeaway for me is that for the everyday Russian citizens, for the small to medium-sized businesses, this doesn't matter one bit. They're already out of the dollar system. Yeah. And unless you're a Russian citizen who wants to travel to the United States for tourism, okay, this is in the next month or two, this is going to hurt a bit, right? Because you're going to go, you're going to exchange your rubles for dollars, and so you're going to get less. Now, if you're traveling from the U.S. or Europe into Russia, and you're going to exchange your money, that's going to actually go a long way. So not a bad time to visit Russia, I guess, if you're going to be exchanging dollars for rubles. But and this doesn't matter because Russia, for the most part, is out of the U.S. dollar system.
Exactly,
and that's
I mean, that's it. Yeah, and that's it. They do have some problems, which is that their economy has been overheating. We've discussed it in previous programs. This has been a problem because the central bank has been raising interest rates to slow the economy. We've just had some more data which shows that the momentum in the economy is still much stronger than the central bank wants it to be. So, they're not able to slow the economy fast enough to start bringing inflation down. And that is a concern. And as you absolutely rightly say, Russia's going to be awash with with rubles rather, in the next few months. That will undoubtedly result in higher investment and more spending, which will probably keep the economy growing at a faster rate than the central bank wants. But it will also inevitably mean that inflation is going to be higher. So that is a problem. But I mean, it is not the same as saying that the entire economy is about to collapse. There is no sign of that. And I think people need to stop talking in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think the inflation is a problem that they're going to have to deal with.
Again, I mean, to say something about this, and we're talking about 8 to 9% annualized inflation, which by historic Russian standards is not particularly high. It's still in single figures. The central bank will not want it to go to double figures, by the way, and that if it starts doing that, then the central bank will be very concerned, and we will probably start to see even more radical action, not just by the central bank, but by the government as a whole. But anyway, we are living in, globally, a high inflation environment, and that is also infecting inflation issues in Russia. So 8 to 9% inflation in Russia. Actually, if you unscramble the figures in Europe and the United States, because Russian inflation figures are very accurate. I'm not going to go into a discussion about how the Russians collect their figures, but even the Financial Times some years ago admitted that the Russians are the most advanced collectors on inflation statistics anywhere on earth. So you can be quite sure that this is the actual true rate of price growth in Russia. You cannot say the same about the West. Here, I think it is now largely acknowledged, even in amongst mainstream economists and commentators, that inflation is being consistently understated. So it may be that the gap isn't that big.
Yeah, the Russian central bank did announce that they're going to halt dollar purchases at least until the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, they are taking some action to bring the volatility
to an end, to smooth it down. Yeah.
And this is something that they've done before,
absolutely,
as well. They've done often in the past.
They are massively experienced in handling this kind of thing.
Yeah. So I want to get back to the Gazprom thing. Short term, this gives Biden for the next month and a half, the Biden White House, a talking point to say that they've squeezed Russian banks and Russian payment systems, impeding Putin's war machine. And the ruble is now losing its strength, and it's ruble against the dollar. So for the next couple of months, the Biden White House can take a victory lap, which is exactly what they want.
Yeah.
As they exit, they want to present themselves as the foreign policy whiz kids. But medium to long term, this seems like it was a very, very stupid idea to remove Gazprombank from SWIFT, because what it's going to do is it's going to force Russia and everyone that wants to buy stuff from Russia, the oil and the gas and all of these things that countries need, especially in Asia, where Russia's going to divert. They're already diverting most of their resources to Asia. They're going to find alternative ways to work around this. They are going to find ways. And at medium to long term, this just once again weakens the position of the US dollar and SWIFT.
Absolutely. And in the short term, and not very short term, it's going to put upward pressure on oil prices. It's bound to, because
which means more money for...
Which means more money for the Russians.
Yeah.
But it's also going to cause increasing problems in the West.
Am I wrong? Just real quick, am I wrong to think that this was timed specifically as the Biden White House exits?
Yes. Of course it was. Exactly. I mean, that is exactly what it was. We come back to the question of why was Gazprombank granted the exemption from the sanctions in the first place? This was done in order to preserve some kind of level of stability in the international energy markets, because the United States wants to preserve, the US government wants to preserve some level of stability in international energy markets. That was very important for the Biden administration before the election, if you remember.
Yeah,
they were
especially during the election.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, the election is now out of the way. It's been lost. The problem now is Donald Trump's, so they can act in this spiteful way. They can extend the sanctions to Gazprombank. That will make it more difficult for people in the West in the short term to buy Russian oil and gas products. They want to close off Russian LNG from Europe, even though Europe is increasingly dependent on Russian LNG, of which Europe is now buying more than it is buying American LNG. Europe, as we know, is in a position where energy prices and energy costs are increasing. But of course, the Biden administration doesn't give a sausage for that. I mean, they've never cared about anything, the hardships that Europeans are facing. So absolutely, you're absolutely correct. What it's going to do is it's going to create disruptions in the global energy system because the Russians won't be able to sell their LNG directly to the Europeans because it means doing so, the Europeans can't pay for it anymore. At least they can't pay directly. There will eventually be workarounds. LNG will be sold instead. Russian LNG will be going to China and India and all of these other places, where it will probably start displacing LNG from the United States and Qatar and those sort of countries. Eventually, the energy markets will find some kind of stability, but at higher cost, because every sanction of this kind increases the complexity of the general trade in energy and leaves the price of energy structurally higher than it would otherwise be. I mean, you're simply creating disruptions and complexities in the global energy market. Now, if Donald Trump is being properly advised about this, people should explain it to him. If he really wants to bring prices of energy and inflation in the United States down, and inflation in the United States is higher, much higher than the Biden administration is saying. That is why Trump won, by the way, just to reiterate that point. He really wants to do it. What he needs to do is to start scaling back all of these sanctions on Russian energy. Unfortunately, I don't think he will, because I don't think this is being explained to him properly.
Yeah, just a final thought, who's really just getting crushed through all of this is the Europeans.
Absolutely.
They're the big once again, they are the big losers in all of this.
Yeah.
Russia's the enemy of the EU? No. Biden White House is the absolute enemy of the European Union, at least the citizens of the European Union. There has not been a U.S. president who has done more damage to the European Union than Biden, the Biden White House.
And there isn't a squeak from any of them. Erdogan is complaining. He says these sanctions on Gazprombank have been a disaster for Turkey. They're causing enormous problems for Turkey. He then immediately telephones Putin and speaks to Putin and says, how can we find ways around this? There's now big discussions between Turkey and Russia about what to do. Erdogan is acting like you would expect a government leader to act in this kind of situation. But the Germans, who are rapidly deindustrializing, the French, who are struggling with their budget, the British, who are also struggling with their budget and their problems, do they come back and say this is all terrible? What is Biden doing? They won't say anything. They won't say anything at all. It is irrational. To the point
lost for words.
It's absolutely. Well, just to say again, we were in Hungary last week, as everybody knows. We were meeting official after official after official there because Hungary has an independent policy. And they were talking about these things. And they were at a loss for words to respond to.
Well, they're pissed off about
this.
They're
pissed off about it, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, this hurts Hungary. This makes things very difficult for Hungary.
It hurts Hungary, which in, I think, was 2023, experienced 25% inflation.
Maybe one day we're going to get an answer as to why the leaders in Europe are like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll get an answer. Who knows? But anyway. All right, we'll end it there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what we are wearing in this video. The link is in the description box down below. Take care.